is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck live on a Friday in September. We are in the home stretch. Just 10 games remaining for the Orioles in the regular season before we get to the playoffs. And as fretful as this team has looked over the last several weeks, they still have about 100% chance of making the playoffs, especially with yesterday's walk-off win in the series finale against the San Francisco Giants. We will touch on that in just a bit. But Danielle, we have breaking news on the Banner Baseball Show, which is the minor league players of the year.
We do. Kobe Mayo is the player, which is no surprise with how he performed this year and also who they traded away. So wasn't a ton of options left. And then your minor league pitcher of the year is Brandon Young, who had a phenomenal season with AAA Norfolk. Was in a talk the second half of the season for a call-up. They never quite needed another guy. But if they did, he would have been the person. 2 great seasons from both of them. And now Kobe Mayo is up in Baltimore and hoping to contribute to this playoff roster.
Yeah, they can't pick somebody who's not in the organization anymore. They can pick somebody who's on the big league roster, but not somebody like Connor Norby, who was dealt away, who had a phenomenal season in AAA this year and is now doing good things with the Miami Marlins. And Brandon Young is going to be a name to watch in a couple months when the Orioles have to decide who to protect from the Rule 5 draft, because he is going to be Rule 5 eligible. And I tend to think that they're going to keep him, but how
I would imagine they definitely do.
Yeah. Anytime you can get a good young arm in your system, especially with this team that is in need of starting pitchers for next season, that'll be exactly what they'll try to do there. All right, Danielle. Yesterday, we saw the Orioles play one of their good old-fashioned, cardiac baseball. They took a 3-2 lead into the 9th inning. Sir Anthony Dominguez comes on for the save. He gets a couple runners on, and then a gapper in right center field leads to a collision between Cedric Mullins and Austin Slater. Thank goodness both those guys seem to be perfectly okay after that. I don't know about perfectly, but they stayed in the game. And then in the bottom of the 9th, just when the Orioles needed it the most, in order to snap a 3-game losing streak and to get the vibes back where they were for the first half of the season, Anthony Santander hits a 2-run walk-off home run. And Danielle, this team has been playing pretty abysmal baseball for the last several weeks. And over the last 5-6 days, it has felt like much more than just injuries. It has felt like much more than just bad luck. It felt like they were beating up on themselves. It felt very much like a mental game for the Orioles. So to get a massive walk-off swing like that from one of your best players, one of your slowest heart-beated players, and your most clutch players in Anthony Santander, had to feel like a massive sigh of relief.
It definitely was. And like you said, yesterday's game, it was like vintage Orioles. Like, it was how they were a year ago, where if you knew the Orioles were going to be down by a couple of runs, you had complete faith that they were going to come back in later innings and tie it up, send it to extras, win somehow. It was just how they played all of last year. Like, they had no fear at all. And in the second half of this year, you saw all of that go away. They all were collectively in slumps. You kind of saw the mojo, as Elias likes to call it, completely go away from this team. And yesterday, I mean, it was one win. On paper, it's exactly the same as every other win. But I saw the way that dugout reacted. I was in that clubhouse after the game. Like, that game, that moment could be the turning point for this whole season. It brought belief back into this team that they can do it.
Yeah, I think fear is a good word, because it did look like, for especially the series in Detroit and then the first 2 games of that series against the Giants, it felt like they were afraid to screw up. And you see that a lot of times with young players, but you didn't see that when Adley Rutschman initially came up and Gunnar Henderson came up. They were playing like they had no expectations, and that's what led to that amazing 101-win season last year. It wasn't until they had these kind of struggles at the big league level for the first time together as a group that you saw them really tense up and tighten up. And it is so fitting that Santander was the one to hit that home run yesterday, because he has been the steady veteran that this team has needed all season long. We sent in our votes for most valuable Oriole. I've had Gunnar Henderson first. I'm sure most people did. And just because he has more than twice as much. You did not. You had Santander first?
Yeah.
So make your case, because Gunnar Henderson has twice as much WAR, according to Baseball Reference, as anybody else on this team. But why did you have Santander first?
I mean, Gunnar does. You're right. He does have the best WAR in the team by far. But to me, NVO, the MVP is about more than just, what it says on paper. Gunnar has been a great guy in this clubhouse. I really admire how at 23 years old, whether the Orioles win or lose, Gunnar is the guy they're ready to talk about it. And I don't think that should have to be on the shoulders of a 23-year-old. He's hit over 30 homers. He has over 20 stolen bases. He's been serviceable most of the year on defense, but I just think the way Santander has played this season and led this team, the way he's taken individual guys under his belt, he has the third most homers in the league. I just think that he deserves that award this year by the way that he has handled and led this team.
Yeah, and when you talk about being a clutch player, he has been that and then some. He's got a OPS of 1.162 and is hitting 292 in late and close situations, which, according to Baseball Reference, is defined as plate appearances in the 7th inning or later, batting when the team is tied, ahead by 1, or the tying run at least on deck. So when the Orioles have needed him the most, as all of these guys have been missing time, as Mountcastle's gone down and Westbrook's gone down and Arias has gone down, you need somebody to breathe some fresh air into this team and to say, it's okay, climb on my back, I got you. And when this team... Yeah, it has absolutely been Santander. So while I voted for Gunnar, I had Santander second on my list. I had Corbin Burnes third for most valuable Oriole. And I totally understand the decision to put Santander first. And I think Gunnar will probably win it, but I think it's going to be awfully close between those two for the top spot.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can't go wrong with either one. Gunnar won it last year, if I'm remembering right. I just think Santander is the guy this year. I think he, as we saw last night, could be the guy to turn around. And obviously, Gunnar contributed to that. If Gunnar didn't hit the single, they wouldn't have won by 2. The inning wouldn't have been extended. So he still plays into every situation. But Anthony's had a career year, and I think that he deserves a recognition.
Yeah, and it helps that he bats a little bit lower in the lineup than Gunnar Henderson, who's led off a lot of games. And the way that the bottom of the lineup has looked the last several weeks with all these guys injured, not many guys have been on base for Gunnar Henderson to do damage. And especially somebody who is 23 years old, there's just so much on his shoulders to be viewed as one of the long-term franchise faces of this team. And he's done exceptionally well. But this is evidence that you need veterans like Anthony Santander. And for somebody who is several weeks away from free agency, the question is more about, can this team afford to not re-sign somebody like Anthony Santander, who is going to be just, 30 years old, who is near the top of the league in home runs, who is giving this team exactly what it needs on offense, doing a serviceable job in right field. Can this team afford to let him walk?
No. I mean, I think if he's gone, Heston Kjerstad's your daily right fielder. And I think that there's a clearer path to playing time for Heston, even if Anthony is still here next year. So I don't even think that's like, it's not the same at all.
Right.
You need both of them in that lineup next year. If you don't have Anthony, you got to go out and get somebody else who can produce those numbers. And there's only 2 other people in this league who are producing better numbers than him, and neither of them are going to be available next year. Yeah. So I believe it's Judge and Ohtani who are ahead of him in the home run rankings, right?
Yeah.
Just those 2. So you're not going to replace him like that. He loves Baltimore. He loves the Orioles. He's very respected in his clubhouse. I don't know why you wouldn't pay him. You have a new owner who, as we all know, has lots of money and has the ability to do things like this. I would argue they need him more than Corbin Burnes next year.
That's something that they will have to think long and hard about. And their hope that they won't have to think about it for a while because they'll have a long playoff run. In the meantime, we did see one of the veterans on this team get designated for assignment, a far less productive veteran on this team. Craig Kimbrell, designated for assignment earlier this week. It had gotten to the point where this was the only option for Mike Elias and the front office. Kimbrell looked like an all-star and could have been an all-star in the first half of the season. And then it all went downhill. 10.59 ERA in the second half. Orioles signed him to a $13 million contract in the offseason with an option for 2025. You can throw that out. That's not getting picked up. He simply could not have been added to this playoff roster because it got to the point where there was simply no situation where you felt comfortable throwing Craig Kimbrell into a game, and we saw it play out in his final appearance with the Orioles.
It's true. I mean, I think that they gave him as long of a grace period as they could. I think that you do owe the respect of somebody who had the first half like he did, has the Hall of Fame resume, has proven in past season that he's able to turn it back around. So I think that he did deserve, a little bit of that grace period to see, can he figure it out again and be the guy for him leading down the stretch. And it just, what was that? Tuesday night, Wednesday night. I'm sorry for getting days of the week at this
Yeah,
point in the season.
sure.
Whatever
Earlier
day,
this week.
whatever game it was, it just became clear when he gave up those 6 runs that there's just no hope in fixing it right now. They did what they had to do, and that he wouldn't have been on this playoff roster at all. And I'm not saying Brian Baker, who was called up to replace him, will be either. I think he'll be gone as soon as Danny Coulomb is back. But there's no point in holding on to him anymore. And at the time of the signing, you had brought up, what is their solution for when this happens? Because this is how Kimbrell's past couple seasons have gone, where he's kind of collapsed at the end of the year. And I think we saw it, they just DFA him and try to move on for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think it really all changed for Kimbrell when he got taken out of the closer role this year. Because once the Orioles couldn't trust him there, he wasn't going for the record anymore. He wasn't had the same juices flowing. He didn't have the same energy on the mound, and he was showing it. He was throwing wild pitches. He was not keeping runners on, which was a problem, admittedly, when he was in the 9th inning anyway. But throughout the course of his career, he has almost 4 times as many appearances in every other inning combined than he does in the 9th inning. So he has pretty much exclusively been used in save situations throughout the course of his career. And so when he was struggling and you took him out of that 9th inning, it wasn't the same. He wasn't the same pitcher. And that was clearly what happened. And frankly, it's almost better that he had those rough outings in the regular season, because we saw what happened with the Phillies last year. It wasn't until the playoffs where he really fell off a cliff, and that cost them critical games in their NLCS against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So for Craig Kimbrell to get his struggles out of the way now, so that the Orioles know we cannot rely on him in the playoffs, he's not even going to be on our playoff roster, almost feels better. But a $13 million contract as well feels like a lot of money because of how little this team has shelled out to free agents in the Mike Elias era. It's really not all that much. It's an okay gamble to make for somebody who is going to be a 1-year stopgap in the injured Felix Bautista.
Yeah. And like I said, they got a solid first half of the season out of him. If they didn't have him, I don't know who would have been the closer in the first half of the season. So they still needed him. Those games still matter as much as they do now, because they all contribute to the playoff numbers and a record at the end of the season. So, theoretically, they paid $13 million for 82 games or 81 games. So they got that out of the way. I think Sir Anthony Dominguez is serviceable in the closer position. He is obviously no Felix Bautista. He has had his issues, as we saw last night. Command, that was the first time we've really seen him struggle with command. So I'm curious to see how that carries over, if that will continue. He's given up 5 solo homers, but last night was his only blown save. So, he's done okay in that position. And they're just going to have to trust him going forward. I do wonder, when Danny Coulomb comes back, if maybe Danny picks up some of the slack, in those platoon situations against certain splits. But Sir Anthony is their guy now, and they just got to put that belief into him going forward.
Yeah, and they have 10 games with which to work here before the end of the regular season to figure out if they truly can trust Sir Anthony Dominguez in a playoff game in a late and close situation. Their magic number yesterday is 5. Danielle, you have been keeping track of this dutifully on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. And you've been trying to calculate how the magic number has been going down every day and exactly how the Orioles can reach the playoffs. So this is a big week for you as you try to do some heavy math.
Yeah, lots of math. People who say journalists don't do math should really look at my notebook right now. Yeah, the magic number is 5. And the good thing for the Orioles is they're playing Detroit. And every win against Detroit this weekend will drop the magic number by 2. And because of where Detroit is, because of the lead they have over Seattle, if they get swept this weekend, Detroit won't be passed by Seattle. So Detroit could be the only team the Orioles have to factor in. So the easiest way the Orioles can clinch on Sunday at home, their last chance to clinch at home, is if they sweep the Tigers. They can still get in if they win two, but that involves, Minnesota getting swept or Seattle losing a game. And there's all these other scenarios that the Orioles can't control, and very complicated tiebreakers because Seattle is a tiebreaker with Detroit, but Minnesota is a tiebreaker with Detroit, but Seattle is a tiebreaker with Minnesota. And the Orioles don't have a tiebreaker with Minnesota yet because they haven't played the last series against Minnesota yet. So if the Orioles want to clinch at home, they just have to win all 3 games this weekend.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That's the easiest way to do it, but it just doesn't feel like this team is going to make things easy for us, Danielle.
No, they won't. It'll probably come down to the last series of the year. Let's be real. But like we've been saying all day, they had a big run last night. Who says they can't carry it over? Ace is on the mound tonight. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Corbin Burns. I'm getting my notes confused here. Corbin Burns starting game 1 tonight. Let's talk about the guys who are back because I wanted to talk about Jacob Webb, the fact that he is back. And let's talk about some of the other guys who are returning from the injured list soon because really running out of time to get these guys back and ready for the playoffs. Jordan Westbrook is in AAA right now on a rehab assignment. He went 1 for 4 yesterday with an RBI single. Orioles are hoping to get him back before the end of the regular season. Really hard to overstate what he meant for this offense before he went out with injury. He was hitting .269 with 18 homers and an .815 OPS first half of the season. And talk about clutch. Santander has been one of the Orioles' most clutch players all season. Jordan Westbrook was right there with him. In late and close situations, Westbrook this year was hitting .426 with a 1.258 OPS. So Jordan Westbrook was even more reliable in those situations than Anthony Santander. And for a guy that is really playing his first full season in the big leagues, just made his first All-Star game earlier this season, Jordan Westbrook was a hugely important piece for this offense. And it's no wonder that they are struggling without him.
Yeah. And, major kudos to Jordan Westbrook because basically the day after he got injured, Jordan Westbrook was out there working out on the field every day without fail, using his good hand, using his legs, doing anything he could to stay in shape. And I think that's part of the reason why he's going to hopefully, potentially, most likely make it back for this team before the end of the season is because he put in so much work and did, whatever he could to stay ready. And I don't know if I've ever seen another player replicate that. I've been doing this since my 5th season. I've never seen another player put in that much work. So he's going to be ready for them when he comes back. He was so sad to be missing the second half. You saw him on TV. He had the little puppy dog eyes. He did not want to be there, but he is on his rehab assignment now. I believe he got 1 hit yesterday in his game. Made an error on defense, but that's okay. That's what a rehab game is for. Their stats don't really matter. It's just to get acclimated back to playing again. But you're right. You can't overstate how important Jordan Westbrook is to this team. And, you see a play, at third base, filling in has been Rivera or Mayo or Soto. And you see a play and you just know Jordan Westbrook probably would have had that. And if he didn't have that, he would have put in a lot more effort to make that play. He would have been a lot closer. And he's just a huge hole in his lineup right now. And, bringing him back would also get rid of some of this dead weight the Orioles have kind of been carrying around on their bench.
Yeah. Emmanuel Rivera has had to play far more games than I think this team ever wanted for a guy that they picked up who had a bad first half of the season with the Marlins. And they picked him up for nothing. And he has suddenly been in their lineup every single day while rookie Kobe Mayo has struggled and Jordan Westbrook has been out and Ramon Urias has been out and Ryan Mountcastle has been out. So getting these guys back is going to be big. One guy that they might not get back because of the way that Mike Elias was talking about him, it didn't sound great. Elias said of Grayson Rodriguez, time is not our friend. And you're talking about a guy who should be starting a playoff game if he's healthy, up there with Zach Eflin and Corbin Burns. And frankly, if it wasn't for Zach Eflin's incredible second half with the Orioles, you'd feel a lot worse about a playoff rotation right now. And Albert Suarez has had some bad starts as of late, but he has still been one of the best, most reliable starting pitchers on this team. Sure would be nice to get Grayson Rodriguez back, but the Orioles have to think about the long-term development and the long-term health of one of their best young starting pitchers. They're not going to try to rush it to get him back for the playoffs if it means potentially risking an injury.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't see how Grayson can start a wild card game. Maybe they're still in the division and they don't have to worry about that. That is looking a little bit less likely every day that goes by. But Grayson Rodriguez has not thrown to hitters yet. Norfolk has 3 games left this season, including today. So I don't see the situation where how Grayson could get on a rehab assignment. So then all of his buildup is going to have to be, some kind of live BP situation, which is not the same. And if that is what, his buildup is, do you really even feel comfortable starting him in a playoff game where everything is at stake? Or do you start Albert Torres or Dean Kramer, who have been healthy for most of the season instead? And I think that's kind of what the case is going to be here.
Yeah. And Mike Elias was asked whether he would consider having Grayson Rodriguez fill a bullpen role, and he kept the door open for that.
Yeah.
It certainly is a lot easier to bring a guy back as in a relief role, but Elias did say he's a starting pitcher. He's always been a starting pitcher throughout the course of his pro career. So to throw him in that kind of situation would be a lot to ask of a guy who is at his age.
I do think he could do it though.
I think so.
He profiles kind of similarly to DL Hall to me, where he has that high-powered stuff. He can throw up to 99, 100 miles an hour, versus Dean Kramer, who is, low to mid-90s and wouldn't overwhelm anybody in a bullpen role. So I do think that Grayson, he's super, super competitive. He's one of the most competitive guys on the team. I think if anybody could adapt to it, it is probably Grayson. So I think that he also, if he's healthy, I see him walking into that manager's office and being like, put me on his team. I'm pitching.
Oh, yeah.
You need me to.
No question.
I see that very much playing out. Again, I still don't know about the wild card round, but if they make it beyond that, I could see him being an impact.
The only thing with DL Hall was they had time to at least adjust him to having, he was converted to a reliever midway through the season, and it's a change in mindset. It's a change in preparation and all that stuff. If they feel like, look, his stuff is just that good, we don't want to overextend him for a start, but we want to use him in these short bursts, I could see it happening. It just depends on how much they want to put on his shoulders and how ready they think he is. But yeah, the want, he is not lacking for desire to be pitching in big game situations for sure. All right, a couple other guys that could be coming back soon. Ryan Mountcastle expected to go on a rehab assignment this week, hoping that he is going to return by the end of the regular season. That would be massive for a team that desperately needs a steady right-handed hitter in this lineup that has been mixing and matching with its lineups as much as humanly possible. To have somebody like Mountcastle in there every day, who is also, we should mention, a Gold Glove caliber first baseman. And there just is a drop off beyond Ryan Mountcastle with every other first baseman defensively. You need him there. And Ramon Arias, not of a Gold Glove caliber anymore, former Gold Glove winner at third base, but solid defense at third, and has come up in big situations over the past couple months and stepped up when Jordan Westburg went down. He is on a similar timeline to Ryan Mountcastle. So 2 more right-handed hitters for a team that is very left-handed heavy right now that they could be getting back soon.
And that allows you to get rid of, Eloy Jimenez is probably on the chopping block at this point. His stats have really dropped off after his first couple weeks with the Orioles, and he can't play defense. He's barely been playing at all at this time of year. They could probably get rid of Kobe Mayo, who has just not adjusted well to major league pitching and hasn't been able to fill that role. And if they need to get rid of one more guy, Rivera or Levon Soto would probably be, on the way out. I see them keeping Austin Slater because he is so strong defensively in the outfield, as maybe like a late inning defensive replacement. But, their lineup will be so much stronger if they can get even 2 out of 3 of these guys back.
Yeah. And you saw with Kobe Mayo just how hard it is to adjust to the life in the big leagues. Somebody who absolutely has crushed minor league competition for years now, is 22 years old, how difficult it can be to step up in the middle of a pennant race and to produce for your team. And I'm sure that the Orioles aren't at all worried about his long-term projection, given how much he struggled at the big league level, but it is hurting the offense right now because he clearly has some more development to go. And I'm sure he'll take this offseason and he'll learn from it and could see him being a major contributor in 2025. But you just don't want to have him on a postseason roster right now.
Yeah, and I don't even know if he would start at this point, to be honest. You also already have to cut your roster from 28 to 26 when you go into the postseason. So 2 more people are going to be out. So he would probably be cut then anyways at this point.
Exactly. Well, we have a lot that we have to cover over the coming days. 3 more games at home for the end of the year against the Tigers tonight, tomorrow, and Sunday before they go on their final road trip of the regular season. At @D_Allentuck is Danielle's Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Write us a good review of the Banner Baseball Show.